Hey, welcome back to Business 150, Introduction to Management. We are now looking at module number 4, and in this particular module, looking at content from chapter 4 of the text. What are we talking about? We're talking about the topic of ethical management and corporate social responsibility. Now, in the broader context, we are still talking about the environment in which we manage, the large context that our organizations exist in, and in which gives rise to our occasion and our specific decisions on how to manage. So you can see from this particular title slide in this very first video of this module, we're looking at the topic of ethical management. What we hope after you finish this video, you'll be able to get a flavor for, so to speak, is defining managerial ethics and explain why it's so darn important. Why do we need to talk about managerial ethics, not only within the broader scope of doing right things in our world and our society, but what is its actual impact on the organizations that we manage? As well as at least giving you a beginning flavor for some of the typical ethical issues that might arise in management that you may confront in your career. So that's really where this video is going. Let's get started. We begin with the question, what is business ethics? And of course, you can be forgiven if you look at that term, business ethics, and say, oh, well, that's just an oxymoron. That's like military intelligence or jumbo shrimp. Those two things don't go together. But really, when on a serious note, when we ask the question, what is business ethics? We need to break this down and really begin to understand what is it we're really talking about, because it's a term that's thrown out there. But let's start this way. You see the first bullet point. Business ethics refers to moral principles and standards. And these moral principles and standards define what is acceptable in terms of behavior in the world of business. And of course, when we say behavior, we mean not only the behavior of individuals, but behavior of entire organizations. Now, I want to make sure we understand from the very outset, when we talk about business ethics, we are talking way beyond mere legal issues. We're talking not simply about whether or not an individual or whether an organization breaks the written law or not. Ethics is far more than that. Because you may know, if you've studied at all the whole issue of law, and especially business law, just because something is legal does not make it ethical. Law typically lags behind reality and real issues. Now, what do I mean by that? Think about this for a moment. By the time someone actually passes a law making some particular activity illegal, typically what has happened is there have been so many egregious violations of that principle, of that issue, that some legislator in government finally got around to writing a law that describes exactly what we don't find legal anymore and what are the possible range of punishments. But of course, by the time it's actually codified as an approved legislative statute, we already understood that stuff was unethical. That's why we pushed on legislators to write a law. Does that make sense? You see, the general principle in society is that law typically lags behind reality. And of course, we know beyond a doubt that just because something hasn't yet got a law issued around it doesn't mean that it's not unethical. And that's really the heart of it. When we say business ethics, and that second point goes beyond legal issues, we mean not only in terms of scope, but also in terms of domain. And therefore, ethical decisions have to be in place for business for more reasons than simply not breaking the law. As you can see there, ethical decisions foster trust among individuals and in business relationships. And trust, as I've mentioned before in this class, is the bedrock foundation for how we do business. Without trust, you're not really going to do business very frequently or very satisfactorily. And you can see there the third bullet point. Unethical decisions destroy trust and make the continuation of business difficult, if not impossible. Sure, you may be able to take someone once, but they'll never want to do business with you again. And that's really the heart of what we're talking about in this class. What we're talking about is how do you build an actual managerial career? How do you build a lifetime of success in business? That's based on the foundational bedrock principle of building trust, being a trustable businesswoman or businessman. So, if we're talking about business ethics, we really have to start with the topic of individual ethics. Because when we're talking about ethics, we're talking about individual women and men making choices, making decisions. Where do those choices come from? They come from the principles, what we personally as individuals understand to be right and wrong. And where do my ethics come from? My ethics and your ethics come from a complex combination of things that have happened to you during history. Things like how were you brought up by your family? What was the influence of your parents? Did you have both parents in your family? And if so, what did your mom and dad teach you? And what did they demonstrate to you? And what did they show you by long-standing example? But not only that, not just your family, but also your friends and your experiences and what your friends got away with and what they weren't able to get away with and what you guys talked about when you were young in middle school about what you thought life was about and what you thought what you wanted to get away with and what you thought would be fun. And from there, from your peers, and also there's other durable institutions as you were brought up, as you grew up, things like school and perhaps church and temple, if you were part of that, or scouting organizations, if you were one of those kids who were one of the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or any of those kinds of organizations, right? As well as from government and from your local institutions, all those kinds of things, your community groups, all of those contribute to the matrix of things that make up your values, morals, your ethics, what you believe to be right and believe to be wrong. Now, when we talk about managers with individual ethics, well, here's really what we begin to talk about. An individual's personal beliefs about whether a behavior, action, or decision is right or wrong. And therefore, you make a choice. Every time you have a choice to make about how you will respond or how you will behave or what you will choose to do that particular morning, you can choose ethical behavior, behavior that generally conforms to your accepted social norms, or you can choose unethical behavior, behavior that does not conform to generally accepted social norms. And we are always making choices. So when we talk about individual ethics, now in the hands of someone who is a manager, they become individual managerial ethics. They're standards of behavior that guide individual managers in their work and the choices they make in their work. And they can include at least 3 different domains. Managerial ethics has something to say about how an organization chooses to treat its employees. With regards to, you see there's some examples: hiring, firing, wages and other types of compensation, work conditions, issues like privacy and respect. But we also have managerial ethics at play with regards to how employees choose to treat the organization, right? And some examples might include how an employee handles potential conflicts of interest, issues of confidentiality and keeping trade secrets, and just mere honesty in all of your dealings with your employer. How employees and how organizations, therefore, treat other economic agents in the outside world becomes the 3rd domain that managerial ethics has something to say about, and this might include how the organization and its employees treats customers, how it treats competitors, how it treats stockholders and suppliers and dealers and labor unions. All of these things are part of the equation of what does managerial ethics affect? What does it touch? What does it change? Now, we give you here a illustration, a table from your textbook. You see it's table 4.1 from the text. Some common areas of organizational misconduct in the United States. And so you can see here the observed misconduct by type and percentages, right? So you can see abusive behavior in the workplace. You can see lying to stakeholders, whether that's owners or whether that's the public or whether that's customers. You can see folks giving into conflict of interest and their relative percentages. You can see pressure to compromise individual ethical standards. And I know you don't think it's right, but the organization or some force thereof is pressuring you to give in, to make a compromise, right? Or how many times you actually report observed misconduct, and after reporting it, how many experience retaliation for reporting. And you can see here all sorts of different ways that organizational misconduct is still very much a challenge here in the United States. Now, what does that mean? It means that as we kick off this module and talking about the whole issue of managers and their choices, whether their choices are ethical or unethical, we hope that you have at least been able to get a flavor for why this is important, what is at risk, and how do managers touch on ethics in the organization. And we've given you just a brief look at some of the ethical issues that you'll probably encounter someplace in your career. They're so prevalent still here in the United States. They are current challenges that we face. Well, we hope that that's been useful. We kick off this topic of organizational ethics, ethics in management, especially for us as decision makers. What do we choose? What do we decide upon? These are the kinds of things we'll talk about in this module, module number 4. And so as we kick this thing off, I hope that you will be a part of and enjoy this discussion. And we will see you in the next video.